In the year 218 BC, as tensions between Carthage and Rome erupted into open war, few could have imagined that one of the most daring military operations in history was about to unfold. Most commanders would have chosen the safer route by sea or sought a direct confrontation in territories already contested by the two powers. Instead, a bold and unexpected strategy emerged: an invasion of Italy through the towering Alps. To many observers of the time, the very idea seemed impossible. The mountains were feared for their harsh weather, steep passes, and deadly terrain. Large armies rarely attempted such crossings, and no one believed a force numbering tens of thousands could survive the journey. Yet preparations began for a campaign that would challenge every assumption about what an army could accomplish. The army that set out from Spain was a diverse force composed of soldiers from different regions of the Carthaginian sphere of influence. Veterans marched alongside newly recruited warriors. Cavalry units accompanied infantry formations, while pack animals carried supplies needed for the long expedition ahead. Among the most remarkable sights were the war elephants, creatures unfamiliar to many European peoples and destined to become symbols of the campaign. As the army moved northward, it crossed rivers and rugged countryside, facing resistance from local tribes that sought to block its progress. Every mile demanded careful planning and constant vigilance, for enemies could strike from forests, hills, and narrow valleys without warning. Crossing the Rhône River in southern Gaul presented one of the first major challenges. The river was wide, swift, and difficult to navigate with such a large force. Engineers and soldiers worked tirelessly to construct rafts and makeshift boats capable of transporting men, horses, and equipment across the water. Local tribes attempted to interfere with the crossing, forcing commanders to devise clever tactics to secure the opposite bank. Through determination and organization, the army succeeded, but the operation consumed valuable time and energy. Even after the river had been crossed, the greatest obstacle still loomed in the distance: the massive wall of mountains separating them from Italy. As the army approached the foothills of the Alps, many soldiers likely understood that they were entering one of the most dangerous phases of the campaign. The mountains rose dramatically above them, their peaks covered in snow even when lower elevations remained passable. Ancient travelers spoke of narrow paths carved into cliffs, sudden storms, and landslides capable of wiping out entire groups without warning. Scouts moved ahead to search for routes, while local guides were recruited to provide knowledge of the terrain. Yet even these guides could not guarantee safety, for the Alps were unpredictable and often hostile to anyone attempting to cross them. The ascent into the mountains quickly proved far more difficult than expected. Steep slopes slowed progress and stretched supply lines to their limits. Soldiers struggled to carry weapons, shields, and provisions while navigating narrow paths that barely accommodated a single file of men. Horses slipped on loose rocks, pack animals lost their footing, and valuable supplies tumbled into ravines below. The higher the army climbed, the colder the air became. Many troops came from regions with warmer climates and were unprepared for freezing temperatures. Every day brought fresh hardships that tested both physical endurance and mental resilience. Mountain tribes posed another serious threat. Familiar with the terrain and skilled in guerrilla tactics, they launched surprise attacks from elevated positions. Boulders were rolled onto marching columns, arrows rained down from hidden locations, and ambushes occurred along narrow passes where escape was nearly impossible. The attackers could disappear into the mountains as quickly as they appeared, making retaliation difficult. These encounters inflicted casualties and slowed the advance, creating constant tension throughout the army. Soldiers never knew whether the next bend in the path would reveal a safe passage or another deadly ambush. Weather became an enemy as dangerous as any opposing force. Snowstorms swept across the mountains with little warning, reducing visibility and covering trails beneath thick layers of ice. Bitter winds cut through clothing and exhausted men already weakened by hunger and fatigue. Nights were particularly brutal. Fires were difficult to maintain, shelter was scarce, and many soldiers found themselves sleeping on frozen ground. Frostbite, illness, and exposure claimed lives even when no battles were being fought. For an army already facing logistical challenges, the harsh climate transformed every step into a struggle for survival. One of the most famous difficulties involved sections of the trail that had been damaged by landslides. In some places, entire portions of the route had collapsed, leaving steep drop-offs that seemed impossible to navigate. Engineers and laborers worked tirelessly to create new pathways, cutting through rock and clearing debris so that the army could continue forward. Progress often slowed to a crawl as men labored under dangerous conditions. Animals and equipment had to be carefully guided across unstable terrain, and even minor mistakes could result in fatal falls. The determination required to overcome these obstacles demonstrated an extraordinary level of discipline within the ranks. Despite suffering heavy losses, the army pressed onward. Food supplies dwindled, and many animals perished from exhaustion, cold, or accidents. Soldiers who had begun the journey full of confidence now marched through conditions that pushed them beyond their limits. Yet the promise of reaching Italy kept them moving. Leaders understood the importance of maintaining morale and constantly encouraged their troops to endure just a little longer. The knowledge that they were attempting something unprecedented helped create a sense of purpose. Every mountain pass conquered became proof that the impossible was gradually becoming reality. When the army finally descended from the Alps into northern Italy, it emerged battered but unbroken. Thousands had been lost during the crossing, and the survivors carried the scars of one of history's greatest military ordeals. Yet their arrival sent shockwaves throughout the Roman world. An enemy force that had been expected to approach by conventional routes had instead appeared in the heart of Italy after accomplishing what many considered impossible. The successful crossing instantly transformed the strategic situation, demonstrating remarkable leadership, endurance, and determination while setting the stage for one of the most dramatic campaigns of the ancient world. The arrival of Hannibal's army in northern Italy after the crossing of the Alps stunned the Roman Republic. Roman leaders had expected the war to unfold far from the Italian heartland, perhaps in Spain, Sicily, or along the Mediterranean coast. Instead, a battle-hardened enemy force suddenly appeared on Italian soil. Although the crossing had cost Hannibal thousands of men, the soldiers who remained were experienced, determined, and fiercely loyal to their commander. The Romans quickly realized that they faced not only an invading army but also one of the most gifted military minds of the ancient world. The campaign that followed would become a masterclass in strategy, deception, and battlefield leadership. The first major clash occurred near the Trebia River in late 218 BC. Roman commanders, eager to drive the invaders from Italy before they could gain momentum, sought a decisive engagement. Hannibal understood the mindset of his opponents and carefully prepared a trap. On a cold winter morning, Roman troops were lured into crossing the icy river before battle. Wet, hungry, and exhausted, they advanced against an enemy that was rested and prepared. Hidden forces waited in ambush while cavalry maneuvered on the flanks. As the battle intensified, the Romans found themselves attacked from multiple directions. Confusion spread through their ranks, and what had begun as a confident advance soon turned into a devastating defeat. The victory at Trebia achieved far more than the destruction of a Roman army. It demonstrated that Hannibal could defeat Rome on its own soil. News of the battle spread rapidly throughout Italy, encouraging some tribes in the north to join his cause. For many communities that had recently come under Roman influence, the victory suggested that Roman power was not invincible. Hannibal understood that military victories alone would not win the war. He needed to convince Rome's allies that supporting Carthage offered a better future than remaining loyal to the Republic. Every success on the battlefield served this larger political objective. As winter passed and the campaign continued, Hannibal moved southward through difficult terrain. In an effort to avoid Roman forces and gain strategic advantage, his army crossed marshlands that were flooded and dangerous. The journey was miserable. Soldiers marched through water for days, struggling against exhaustion and disease. Animals died, supplies were lost, and many men suffered greatly from the harsh conditions. Hannibal himself reportedly endured severe physical hardship during this march. Yet despite these challenges, he maintained control of his army and continued advancing deeper into Italy, searching for opportunities to strike at Roman forces. The next major confrontation occurred near Lake Trasimene in 217 BC. This battle would become one of the most famous ambushes in military history. Hannibal carefully selected the battlefield, choosing a narrow area bordered by hills and the lake itself. Roman forces pursued him aggressively, believing they had a chance to engage the enemy. What they did not realize was that Carthaginian troops had already taken concealed positions around the area. As the Roman army entered the trap during the early morning hours, visibility was limited by heavy mist rising from the lake. At the signal to attack, Carthaginian soldiers surged from their hidden positions. The Romans were caught completely off guard. Many units had no time to organize proper defensive formations. Some soldiers were attacked before they even understood the situation. Trapped between the lake and enemy forces, Roman troops struggled desperately to resist. Chaos dominated the battlefield as commanders lost control and communication broke down. Thousands were killed in a matter of hours, while many others drowned attempting to escape through the waters of the lake. The destruction at Lake Trasimene sent shockwaves through Rome. Entire formations had been annihilated, and a Roman consul had been killed. Fear spread throughout the Republic as reports of the disaster arrived. Citizens wondered whether the enemy might soon march directly on the city itself. The psychological impact of the victory was enormous. Hannibal had not simply defeated Roman armies, he had exposed weaknesses in Roman leadership and demonstrated his ability to outthink opponents before battle even began. Confidence that had once seemed unshakable was beginning to crack. In response to these defeats, Roman leaders changed their strategy. Rather than seeking immediate large-scale battles, they adopted a more cautious approach under the leadership of Fabius Maximus. His strategy focused on avoiding direct confrontation while wearing down Hannibal through harassment and attrition. Although many Romans criticized this approach as cowardly, it reflected the growing respect and fear that Hannibal inspired. Roman commanders understood that rushing into battle against him often ended in disaster. Nevertheless, political pressure and public frustration eventually pushed Rome back towards seeking a decisive engagement. Throughout these campaigns, Hannibal consistently demonstrated exceptional leadership. His army was composed of soldiers from many different regions, speaking different languages and possessing different traditions. Maintaining unity among such a diverse force required remarkable skill. He rewarded bravery, inspired loyalty, and adapted tactics to suit the strengths of his troops. His cavalry units played a particularly important role, often providing the mobility and flexibility that allowed him to outmaneuver larger Roman armies. These qualities helped transform his force into one of the most effective military organizations of the ancient world. By the time these early victories had been achieved, Hannibal had established himself as Rome's most dangerous enemy. Trebia and Lake Trasimene were not isolated successes but part of a larger campaign that steadily increased pressure on the Republic. Roman armies had suffered repeated defeats, allies were beginning to question their loyalty, and uncertainty spread across Italy. Each victory strengthened Hannibal's reputation while deepening the crisis facing Rome, creating the conditions that would eventually lead to the massive confrontation at Cannae, where the struggle between the two powers would reach an even more dramatic level. By 216 BC, the war between Rome and Carthage had reached a critical stage. The Roman Republic had already suffered devastating defeats at Trebia and Lake Trasimene, and fear spread throughout Italy as Hannibal continued to move freely across the peninsula. Yet despite these setbacks, Rome remained determined to destroy the invading army. Roman leaders believed that their previous failures had resulted from poor decisions and unfavorable circumstances rather than any fundamental weakness. Convinced that overwhelming force could finally bring victory, they assembled one of the largest armies in the history of the Republic. Citizens, allies, and veterans were called into service, creating a massive force intended to crush Hannibal once and for all. The Roman army marched towards southern Italy and eventually confronted Hannibal near the small town of Cannae in Apulia. The battlefield consisted of open plains that seemed ideal for Rome's strategy. Roman commanders believed that superior numbers would allow them to overpower the Carthaginian army through sheer force. Estimates vary, but ancient sources suggest that Rome fielded tens of thousands more soldiers than Hannibal. Confidence was high among many Roman officers, who viewed the upcoming battle as an opportunity to restore the Republic's honor and end the long series of humiliations. Few suspected that they were about to walk into one of the most brilliant tactical traps ever devised. Hannibal carefully studied the terrain and the habits of his opponents. He understood that Roman commanders favored aggressive attacks and relied heavily on the strength of their infantry. Rather than resisting this tendency, he decided to use it against them. His battle plan depended on encouraging the Romans to do exactly what they wanted to do, push forward with maximum force. Every part of his army was positioned with a specific purpose. His strongest and most experienced troops were placed on the flanks, while the center consisted of forces that would gradually yield ground under pressure. To Roman observers, the formation appeared vulnerable. In reality, it was designed with extraordinary precision. As the battle began, Roman infantry advanced in dense formations. The sheer weight of their numbers pushed against Hannibal's center, which slowly retreated as planned. To the Romans, this seemed like proof that victory was within reach. They continued pressing forward, eager to break through the enemy line and destroy the opposing army. The more they advanced, however, the deeper they moved into the trap. Their tightly packed formations limited mobility and made communication increasingly difficult. Soldiers at the front could not easily see what was happening on the flanks, while those farther back continued pushing forward, creating even greater congestion. Meanwhile, the struggle on the wings of the battlefield unfolded with equal importance. Hannibal's cavalry, commanded by skilled leaders and supported by experienced horsemen, launched aggressive attacks against Roman cavalry units. The Carthaginian horsemen quickly gained the upper hand. Roman cavalry forces, already outmatched in mobility and coordination, were driven from the field. Once their opponents had been defeated, Hannibal's cavalry did not simply celebrate victory. Instead, they turned their attention toward the rear of the Roman army, preparing to play a decisive role in the battle's final phase. As the Romans continued advancing against the retreating center, the shape of the Carthaginian line gradually changed. What had initially appeared to be a bulging formation slowly transformed into a curved structure that wrapped around the advancing Romans. At the same time, Hannibal's elite infantry on the flanks began moving inward. These seasoned troops had remained disciplined throughout the battle, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now they attacked from both sides simultaneously, hitting Roman formations that were increasingly crowded and unable to maneuver effectively. The situation deteriorated rapidly for the Roman army. Soldiers who had expected to break through the enemy lines suddenly found themselves attacked from multiple directions. The dense formation that had seemed like a strength now became a deadly disadvantage. Men were packed so closely together that many could barely swing their weapons. Confusion spread as officers struggled to maintain order. Commands became difficult to hear amid the noise of combat, and units lost contact with one another. What had begun as an organized advance was turning into a nightmare of chaos and desperation. The final stage of the battle unfolded when Hannibal's cavalry completed the encirclement. Having defeated Roman horsemen earlier in the day, they now attacked from behind while infantry pressed from the front and sides. The Roman army was trapped. Surrounded on all sides, thousands of soldiers fought desperately for survival. There was no room to retreat and little opportunity to escape. The battlefield became a scene of relentless slaughter as wave after wave of trapped soldiers were cut down. Ancient historians describe the destruction as almost unimaginable, with entire formations wiped out where they stood. The losses suffered by Rome at Cannae were staggering. Tens of thousands of soldiers were killed, including many of the Republic's most experienced officers and political leaders. Senators, nobles, and military commanders perished alongside ordinary citizens. Entire families lost fathers, sons, and brothers in a single day. Never before had Rome experienced such a catastrophic military defeat. The scale of the disaster shocked contemporaries throughout the Mediterranean world. News spread rapidly across kingdoms and cities, many of which believed that Rome's collapse was now only a matter of time. The psychological impact of Cannae was almost as devastating as the military losses themselves. Allies began questioning whether Rome could still protect them. Some cities defected to Hannibal's side, hoping to align themselves with the apparent victor. Enemies of Rome saw new opportunities to challenge its power. Across Italy, uncertainty and fear grew as people wondered whether the Republic could survive such a blow. Hannibal had achieved one of the greatest victories in military history, demonstrating tactical genius on a scale rarely matched before or since, while Rome faced the darkest and most dangerous moment of its existence. The aftermath of Cannae in 216 BC left the Roman Republic facing what appeared to be an impossible situation. Tens of thousands of soldiers had been killed, many of the Republic's most experienced commanders were dead, and entire regions of Italy were questioning their loyalty to Rome. Throughout the Mediterranean world, observers believed that Rome's collapse was inevitable. No state in living memory had suffered such catastrophic military losses and continued to fight. Hannibal's reputation reached legendary status, and many expected him to march directly on Rome itself. The Republic stood wounded, isolated, and surrounded by uncertainty, yet its leaders made a decision that would define the future of their civilization. They would not surrender. The Roman Senate reacted to the disaster with remarkable determination. Instead of seeking peace negotiations, it focused on rebuilding. Emergency measures were introduced across the Republic. New soldiers were recruited from every available source. Young men who had never expected to fight were called into service, while older veterans returned to the ranks. Even slaves were offered opportunities to serve in exchange for freedom. Resources were gathered from across Roman territory, and every effort was directed toward ensuring that new armies could be raised. The Senate understood that survival depended on persistence, not immediate victory. At the same time, Rome began to rethink its military strategy. Previous commanders had repeatedly sought direct confrontations with Hannibal, believing that superior manpower would eventually prevail. The disasters at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae proved that this approach played directly into Hannibal's strengths. Roman leaders increasingly embraced a strategy based on patience and endurance. Rather than risking another massive battle, they focused on avoiding situations where Hannibal could exploit his tactical brilliance. Small engagements, defensive operations, and constant pressure replaced reckless attempts to achieve quick victories. This approach was often frustrating for many Romans. Citizens accustomed to decisive action viewed caution as weakness. Some politicians demanded aggressive campaigns, arguing that Rome's honor required direct confrontation with the enemy. Yet the strategy gradually achieved results. Hannibal remained undefeated on the battlefield, but he could not force Rome to negotiate. Every year that passed required his army to remain active far from home, dependent on limited reinforcements and increasingly difficult supply arrangements. Rome's refusal to break under pressure became one of its greatest strengths. Meanwhile, the war expanded beyond Italy. Roman commanders recognized that defeating Hannibal required attacking the broader foundations of Carthaginian power. One of the most important theaters of conflict was Spain, where Carthage controlled valuable territories and resources. Roman armies launched campaigns aimed at disrupting Carthaginian influence and cutting off the support that Hannibal depended upon. These operations were difficult and costly, but they gradually shifted momentum away from Carthage. Victories in Spain weakened enemy resources while providing Rome with valuable experience and confidence. A new generation of Roman leadership emerged during these years. Among the most significant figures was a young commander who demonstrated extraordinary military talent and political skill. While Hannibal remained active in Italy, this leader focused on expanding Roman success elsewhere. Through a combination of bold operations, careful planning, and effective diplomacy, he captured key territories and undermined Carthaginian influence. His achievements helped transform the strategic situation, giving Rome opportunities that had seemed impossible in the dark days following Cannae. As Roman fortunes improved, Hannibal faced increasing challenges. Although he continued to win battles and maintain a formidable presence in Italy, he struggled to achieve the decisive political victories he needed. Many Italian allies remained loyal to Rome despite years of warfare. Reinforcements from Carthage were often insufficient, and opportunities to exploit earlier successes gradually diminished. Hannibal's army remained dangerous, but the strategic environment was changing. Rome's vast resources, resilient political system, and ability to absorb losses were slowly beginning to outweigh Hannibal's tactical brilliance. The turning point came when Rome carried the war directly into North Africa. By threatening Carthage itself, Roman commanders forced their enemy to confront a crisis on its own soil. The Carthaginian leadership could no longer focus exclusively on Italy. Faced with the danger of invasion, they made a critical decision. Hannibal, who had spent years campaigning in Italy, was recalled to defend his homeland. The commander who had terrorized Rome for more than a decade now found himself preparing for a final confrontation under entirely different circumstances. The decisive battle occurred at Zama in 202 BC. Both sides understood the importance of the moment. For Hannibal, it was an opportunity to save Carthage and preserve everything he had fought for. For Rome, it was a chance to end the war and secure its future. The battle was fiercely contested, featuring experienced soldiers on both sides and commanders whose reputations had become legendary. Unlike earlier Roman leaders who had underestimated Hannibal, the Roman commander at Zama carefully adapted his tactics to meet the challenge. Through effective leadership and disciplined execution, Rome achieved victory. The end of the Second Punic War marked one of the most important turning points in ancient history. Rome had survived the greatest threat it would ever face. It had endured devastating defeats, lost countless citizens, and faced moments when destruction seemed certain. Yet through resilience, adaptation, and relentless determination, it emerged stronger than before. Carthage was forced to accept harsh terms, while Rome expanded its influence across the Mediterranean. The Republic's victory demonstrated that endurance could overcome even the most brilliant battlefield successes, and that a society willing to learn from failure and continue fighting could transform near destruction into lasting dominance.